والقلم وما يسطرون ما أنت بنعمة ربك بمجنون وإن لك لأجرا غير ممنون وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم فستبصر ويبصرون بأيكم المفتون إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين فلا تطع المكذبين ودوا لو تدهنوا فيدهنون ولا تطع كل حلاف مهين هماز مشاء بنميم مناع للخير معتد أثيم عتل بعد ذلك زنيم أن كان ذا مال وبنين إذا تتلى عليه آياتنا قال أساطير الأولين سنسمه على الخرطوم إنا بلوناهم كما بلونا أصحاب الجنة إذ أقسموا ليصرمنها مصبحين ولا يستثنون فطاف عليها طائف من ربك وهم نائمون فأصبحت كالصريم فتنادوا مصبحين أن اغدوا على حرثكم إن كنتم صارمين فانطلقوا وهم يتخافتون أن لا يدخلنها اليوم عليكم مسكين وغدوا على حرد قادرين فلما رأوها قالوا إنا لضالون بل نحن محرومون قال أوسطهم ألم أقل لكم لولا تسبحون قالوا سبحان ربنا إنا كنا ظالمين فأقبل بعضهم على بعض يتلاومون قالوا يا ويلنا إنا كنا طاغين عسى ربنا أن يبدلنا خيرا منها إنا إلى ربنا راغبون كذلك العذاب ولعذاب الآخرة أكبر لو كانوا يعلمون إن للمتقين عند ربهم جنات النعيم أفنجعل المسلمين كالمجرمين ما لكم كيف تحكمون أم لكم كتاب فيه تدرسون إن لكم فيه لما تخيرون أم لكم أيمان علينا بالغة إلى يوم القيامة إن لكم لما تحكمون سلهم أيهم بذلك زعيم أم لهم شركاء بل يأتوا بشركائهم إن كانوا صادقين يوم يكشف عن ساق ويدعون إلى السجود فلا يستطيعون خاشعة أبصارهم ترهقهم ظلة وقد كانوا يدعون إلى السجود وهم سالمون فذرني ومن يكذب بهذا الحديث سنستدرجهم من حيث لا يعلمون وأملي لهم إن كيدي متين أم تسألهم أجرا فهم من مغرم مثقلون أم عندهم الغيب فهم يكتبون فاصبر لحكم ربك ولا تكن كصاحب الحوت إذ نادى وهو مكظوم لولا أن تداركه نعمة من ربه لنبذ بالعراء وهو مذموم فاجتباه ربه فجعله من الصالحين وإن يكاد الذين كفروا ليزلقونك بأبصارهم لما سمعوا الذكر ويقولون إنه لمجنون وما هو إلا ذكر للعالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. رب صل على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآله محمد.
Jazakallah, Ahsan, Brother Michael. Jazakallah. I would now like to request Brother Mohsin to please come and recite a manqabat with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا. تو ہے مسیحا ہے جہاں شاہ خراساں ہے لقب یوں ہر فرشتہ روزے پر آتا ہے تیرے بادب. حارد نہیں ہوتی تیرے روزے پہ کوئی بھی دعا. نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا. بینائی بھی دیتا ہے تو گویائی بھی دیتا ہے تو مانگے اگر تجھ سے کوئی دانائی بھی دیتا ہے تو. تو بھی تو باب علم ہے تو بھی تو ہے مشکل کشا. نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا. ہے زامین آہو بھی تو گل بھی ہے تو خوشبو بھی تو ہے پہنچتا ہر آنکھ سے گرتے ہوئے آنسو بھی تو. تیری عطائے دیکھ کر دشمن کو بھی کہنا پڑا. نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا. تیری کرامات نظر شب ہو کہ ہو وقت سحر لیتا ہے ہر زائر تیرا روزے کی جالی چوم کر. مشہد مقدس ہو گیا تو نے جو آ کر دی اذان. نانا نبی دادا علی دادی تیری خیر النساء المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا المدد مولا رضا बीनाई भी देता है तू गोयाई भी देता है तू मांगे अगर तुझसे कोई दानाई भी देता है तू तू भी तो बाबे इल्म है तू भी तो है मुश्किल कुशा नाना नबी दादा अली दादी तेरी खैरुन्निसा अलमदद मौला रज़ा अलमदद मौला रज़ा अलमदद मौला रज़ा अलमदद मौला रज़ा बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सलवात अल्लाहुम्मा
Hasan, Jazakallah, Brother Mohsin. That was beautiful. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected Sayyid, elders, brothers and sisters in faith, Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum. Congratulations to all Mu'mineen on the birth of Imam Ridha alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Once again, we are honored to host Sayyid Hasan Ali Rizvi from Orlando. Jazakallah Shaykh for accepting our invitation. It is always a pleasure to have you here. Just a quick announcement before I request the Shaykh Sayyid to ascend to the minbar. A quick reminder about the blood drive that our friends at Who is Hussein are organizing in August. They've requested the community for all those who are able to register for this blood drive. Inshallah, together we will better the lives of many in the name of Hussein alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. You may please register online at blood.whoishussein.org. As always, event details like these and our programs are posted on our webpage, cfkdfw.org, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and to our WhatsApp group. QR codes for those are present on the walls here as well. Jazakallah to all our sustaining members, donors, volunteers, and program sponsors for your contributions. If you're not a member, please consider becoming one by contacting our membership director, Brother Asif Patel. For opportunities to donate and sponsor programs or help behind the scenes, please feel free to speak to me or any of the existing volunteers. Let us now recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of tonight's program sponsors, all our marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Rahman Rahim. I would now like to request the Sayyid to please ascend to the minbar with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'd like to first begin by wishing all of you an Eid Waladat Mubarak. Alhamdulillah, wanted to thank the City of Knowledge community for this kind invitation once again. It's always an honor to be in front of the mu'mineen and mu'minat in Dallas. So I was deciding on what to speak about. And obviously, I know that it's the wilada of the 8th Imam, so I'm forced to speak about something about the 8th Imam. I can't, just jump off into some other random topic. But the thing is that there's so many other things and topics that I actually want to address. Specifically, I need to talk about Ms. Marvel. I have to get that out of my system at some place, at some time. And so I was preparing everything and thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because I can't abandon the 8th Imam. I have to talk about him. And, my nafs requires me to talk about Ms. Marvel and rant about that a little bit too. I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? And then I had my aha moment. I said, there actually is a connection between both of them. We'll see how this train wreck of a speech goes and see if I'm able to actually connect both of these ideas, inshallah ta'ala. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So normally when we think about the 8th Imam, the main title that comes to mind is that he's Gharib al-Ghuraba, right? That he's this stranger. And normally the idea about that in our minds is that, yeah, he's Gharib and he's the most Gharib out of all the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam because he's been separated and he was taken far away from his family. And he was not only, other Imams were, under house arrest and taken away, but he was buried far away from them as well, and still is. So he's separated from everybody. And that's ghurba, right? In that sense. So what I want to focus on first is to talk about this idea of ghurba itself. Now you're like, Hasan, this is a wilada, man. Why are you starting off with this depressing stuff? But inshallah, there's hopefully some points that I think will be beneficial. So the first thing I want to begin with is actually this idea of ghurba. In some riwayat has been even mentioned by his father, right? Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So they say that once the children of the 7th Imam, all of them were gathered around in this report, and they said Imam Ridha passed by. And so Imam al-Kadhim had mentioned to everybody, he says, Inna ibn hada, this son of mine, yamutu fi ardi ghurba. He's going to die in, a gharib, far off, strange land. فَمَنْ زَارَهُ مُسَلِّمًا لِأَمْرِ. Whoever visits him, performs his ziyarah, مُسَلِّمًا لِأَمْرِ. Right? That they've submitted and then taslim to his amr and his commands. And عَارِفًا بِحَقِّهِ. They have ma'rifah of his haqq, of his reality, of his truth, of what he stands for. كَانَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلْ كَشُهَدَاءِ بَدْرٍ. So people who will end up now in the future going and visiting the 8th Imam. It doesn't say whether he's living or passing. Anybody who comes and does this ziyarah, they say that these individuals, with the condition that they have the ma'rifah, that they are obeying his commands, that they've done taslim to him, that they have the station in the maqam just like the shuhada of Badr. Now, that's a big deal because, in other riwayat, the maqam of the shuhada of Badr is no joke, right? These shuhada of Badr are some of the greatest Muslims that have been described in riwayat. And inshallah, if we get time, we'll talk a little bit about why that's the case and maybe what's the connection of the zawar of Imam Ridha and the shuhada of Badr. What kind of connection is this? But I want to first start off with this idea of being gharib, of this ghurba. What does this mean? So, we obviously in our own languages, we have this concept of being gharib. So, if I were to ask you, for example, in Urdu, what does it mean? Who do you call a gharib? Yeah, somebody who's poor, right? So in Arabic, that might be one of the examples, but it's not the main sort of essential meaning there. So when you look in the various dictionaries, the classical dictionaries, they say, yeah, gharib can be, one of the instances can be a poor person. It can be, normally as we think about it also, is somebody who's a stranger, who's alone in the land, who's far away, fine. But ghurba itself just indicates on what they say, bu'd wa nawa. Just being distant and being remote, that's it, right? Having this, this distance and remoteness. So therefore, a gharib doesn't always have to be a person. It's anything which is far away from some other idea or object or thing that you have in mind. Now that can be understood physically, like most of us have, but it can be also understood metaphysically and spiritually as well. Right? So it's not just like physical lands. That's one example of it. But there's also a deeper physical, metaphysical, metaphysical and spiritual understanding as well. So, for example, sometimes words in Arabic that the Arabs themselves will say, this is gharib for us, was words that they don't understand, right? Like that, we don't know what this word means, right? It's what's coming from outside. So for language themselves, of the Arabs, they say, look, we don't know what this word means, it's not within our fusha or our language, so we don't know what that is. So they would describe words, foreign words, as being gharib. Just words which were majhul and unknown to them. Another example is, if we look at some other derivatives of the word, ghurba or gharaba, is we have the word maghrib. What does maghrib mean? Right? We have the mashriq and the maghrib. What is the maghrib? The west, right? So, okay, what does that mean? Well, physically, it means for them that they had some idea about the east, some travels and things like that. But the maghrib, besides being, in the west, it was something which was remote and unknown to them. The Arabs didn't understand what was going on in the West, right? So physically, it was unknown to the Arabs, meaning geographically. But even metaphysically and spiritually, there's something deeper there too that a lot of ulama bring out there. They say the Maghrib itself is not just a physical location that's described. Maghrib and Maghribiya is describing anything which is distant and remote from haqq and haqiqat. Anything which is distant and remote and doesn't recognize and understand the truth. Even if you look into the works right now of a lot of these metaphysicians and philosophers, traditionalists, perennialists, all these fancy people, all these fancy elites, when they talk about the Maghrib, they don't necessarily only mean the Western civilization in the Western world. They're talking about any person, even if they live in, let's say, the East, in the Orient, as sometimes it's called, even if they live there, but they have a Westernized mentality, they say that these people are living a Maghribi kind of life, because they are far distanced from the true understandings of Islamic teachings. They're removed from it and they're remote from that. Right? Now, why is the eighth Imam gharib al-ghuraba? Now, there's different explanations given by our ulama. Now, let's go through a few of them. If you can recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Some of them, again, that's what comes to our mind. It's what we already know. The idea of the physical, geographical ghurba. He's gharib because he was taken away from his family and he was buried far away from his family as well. Right? And they say that even physically as well, the ghurba that took place in his life was that Ma'mun, see, according to our historians, when Imam Ridha alayhi salam, when he was in Medina, they say he enjoyed relative, use the word relative in a very specific way, relative freedom. When he was in Medina, he had general support among the Ahlul Medina. He was able to teach, he was able to give his own fatwa, he had support when he needed it. It was generally free. It's not like he was the governor, obviously. It's not like he had khilaf at that point, but there was still some sort of freedom that was there in terms of him being able to give hidayah to the people. And of course, this is something that the khulafa never wanted that. So they had to make sure that to stop that increase of haqq being spread, so that's why he had to be pulled away and removed from Medina and brought closer to the Khalifa, right, Ma'mun. And of course, once he's in Khurasan, then now he's not really able to freely pass fatwa. He can't have these durus and these teachings and this education system that he had in Medina. So they say that this is perhaps one of the other meanings of ghurba as well for the Imam, that he is now far away from his Shia in that sense, or even Muslimin that would be able to take lessons from him. Now he can't do that anymore. He's basically stuck all alone in a place where he can't, explain his information. And we have riwayat which are also related to this. For example, one from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. He's reported to have said in one place, al-ulama ghuraba, that ulama are also ghuraba. All of them are strangers, and they're people who are in remote and distant. Like, well, how? لِكَثْرَةِ الْجُهَالِ, because of the increase and the intense amount of juhal, meaning people who are jahil, because of ignorant people. You see, when a society or a community is dominated by foolish, ignorant thinking, then when somebody who actually is trying to say something which is correct, which is rational, which is logical, which is Islamic, they're going to look, that alim will look like a fool. Again, not alim in the sense that they went to the house and came back, right? Because sometimes they can be they can be fools too, right? Being in the house by itself doesn't mean much, right? It doesn't have to mean everything, right? We have both. We have people who are here, who are just sincere mu'mineen and mu'minat, and we can be, in a sense, consider them ulama because they have information about Islam and they act upon it. That's great. At the same time, you have people who go to the hawza and they study all these fancy terms, but then they don't really act upon that. Their akhlaq doesn't really change. Right? So when an alim, when somebody who's really connected to the truth is surrounded by people who are more connected to ignorance, then that alim now is gharib, because he can't teach freely, because people won't recognize, they won't understand it. They're going to dominate him and say, we don't even want to hear your ideas anymore. Right? Literally, they just become subject of cancel culture, right? And all these other kind of things. They're literally canceling haqq, and that's what's happening in a lot of communities right now too, right? Like, we don't want to hear all this stuff. It's like, what? This is what the Quran says. No, we don't want to hear the Quran anymore. Like, what? Well, yeah, sorry, we've moved past Allah's teachings. We're in flux now. We've evolved. We're at a different heightened intellectual state. Like, okay, no problem, sure. These are some of the issues that we are dealing with, unfortunately. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So these are some of the physical ways that the Imam had experienced this ghurba and distance and remoteness. Now there's also metaphysical ones. I don't want to go too in-depth into that. But some ulama say, look, at the start of around, let's say the 6th Imam's time, this idea of a wikala system started to develop, where the Imams started to develop a structure and a connective system among the Shia in various different areas in the Islamic empire, which would be able to pass along and connect themselves with their Imam. So again, some historians say it started around the time of the 6th Imam. And then it got stronger with the 7th, and then stronger with the 8th, 9th, 10th, right, etc. And especially with the later Imams, it became more of a hidden sort of thing, right? The Imams were preparing the Shias for ghaiba. So they said at this time too, the 8th Imam was strengthening this idea of this wikala system, right? The wikala system was what? It was broken down into a few, oh, ya Allah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. You guys are about to be gharib over there too, man. What's going on? Ya Allah. I'm glad I'm gharib from that. I was nice and far away from that. Allah protected me from Ya Allah. Everybody okay? Yeah? Allah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sisters, if you need more room, we'll give you more room. You don't have to, fight your way over. It's okay. We'll grant you more room, no problem. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala. Maybe you have to be careful what I'm saying. This wall, this divar is getting upset with some of my words. Okay. So this wikala system, there is a few different dimensions to it, right? One of them was aqidah and aqaid. The Imams had to make sure that their belief system, meaning the belief system of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, needed to be distributed among the Muslims, right? The Shias. And most of them couldn't really do it openly. Because obviously this would, the crosshairs was already on them from the Khulafa. But so they had to, not just with taqiyya, but generally they had to hide the true beliefs of the Shias. And some people, they criticize, they say, well, all you ideas that you Shias have, how come we don't see it plainly and clearly in the words of the Imams? But, well, yeah, because all of the Khulafa were placing them under house arrest, they were stopping them from speaking out loud. Like, we were always a secret movement. We were always a basement movement. Even over here, right, when people first left their countries and moved to, the West, Shiism was always a basement religion in that sense too. I remember, well, I don't remember this because it didn't happen, it happened before I was born. But, my parents would tell me when they first came from Pakistan to, to the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Specifically New York, New Jersey, right? I think you remember, right? So when they first got there, nobody had a center or anything. So they actually rented out space in the UN to hold majalis. That's where Azadari took place, in like the basement in some room in the United Nations building. That's where people from New York and New Jersey gathered, in all places in the United Nations, right? In some basement room, right? Maybe that's why they have a little bit of barakah, because the name of Imam Hussein was mentioned in the building. I don't know. I don't want to give him too much credit. But yeah, we've always been this sort of secret underground movement. So when historians are objectively looking at history, like, how come all of your aqeedah and all your beliefs are not openly mentioned? Well, why would you think it's openly mentioned when these guys were being harassed all the time, when these khulafa were ready to, even among the Sunni scholars, they were putting them to the death, let alone talk about the Shia scholars. So obviously it's probably not going to be openly discussed in the way that you're looking for. So aqaid system was being distributed between the imams, their companions would go and travel to the different areas in the Islamic Empire, and they would go and they would teach. And it's funny because people talk about, these anti-taqlidi types. Like, look, taqlid was always pretty much there. Okay, not exactly in the same way it is right now, sure, but the system was there. The imams would teach people, they would go and they'd spread the knowledge, and the imams would say, this is so-and-so individual is my representative in Basra, in Kufa, right, et cetera, et cetera. So this was pretty much always there. Sometimes it's surprising, people have these objections. I'm like, look, just, read some of the history at least before you start criticizing things. Yeah, if you want to critique the history, sure, but at least read and understand and then go ahead and critique. So aqaid was one part. The other part, which is obviously the more important part, was, a little bit of money too, right? Muslims, nobody can survive without money. So the khums system, which was there, the wakala system helped protect that too. Obviously the Shias couldn't openly give their khums out. Even over here now, you see sometimes when khums is openly given, people get in trouble too, so you have to be, we have to be careful. So over there, it was secretly being given to certain companions, and they would go and they would take trips and, for example, meet the imam during Hajj and then secretly pass it to them. So this wikala system also kept that in line as well. So aqaid was there, the monetary financial system was there, and it wasn't just khums collection, it was also the distribution as well. So, for example, a companion would come from, let's say, Basra. They say, look, so-and-so, like many of your Shia, our Shia are in need in this area. So the imam would slip him some money, say, go and distribute it, but very secretly. So they would go and do things like that. So this became a social welfare system as well. So you had aqaid system being distributed. You had, besides beliefs, you had money. And then you also had fatwa too. Because even fatwa needed to be kept under wraps. Right? Some people ask, why is there all this confusion in the riwayat? Like, why are some imams being contradictory? They're saying this is halal, the next day they're saying it's haram. Like, oh, why is that the case? Like, sometimes you find contradictions, and this is what ulama have to work on reconciling some of the contradictions that may show up in these fatwa, or at least in the hadith. Some of the explanation that's given is that, look, these imams could not openly show the khulafa that they had their own ideas and they were pushing this out. So they had to say, well, here's one idea, and here's one idea. So a lot of riwayat, when they talk about, for example, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, when people would openly ask for, his opinions, he would make sure, in most situations when he feared and knew that there was probably going to be spies from the khulafa there, he'd say, well, the people of Basra say this, the people of Kufa say this, the people of Makkah say this, the people of Medina say this. He would give these sort of different ideas. And the people, the real Shias who were there, they would know exactly what was going on. And of course, you always have those extra special Shias in the group who just didn't get the memo, right? So it'd say, but Imam, what's your view? What's your view? And then the Imam, well, I'm bringing it for our times, like, what are you doing, man? Like, stop it. I'm trying to speak in code here. Like, don't you get what's going on? And sometimes the Imam's like, I'm giving you the views, that's it. And then after the spies or the suspected spies would leave, the Shias are like, man, what are you doing? Right? You can't be so open with this. Because, the Imam is under threat. Shiism is under threat. So now this wikala system, as the khulafa started to realize, hey, if this wikala system starts to pick up more and more steam, then we're out of business and we're done. So that's one of the other reasons why the Imam had to be pulled away forcefully from Medina and taken to Khurasan, to basically cut his power base and to cut off his connection to this wikala system. So this is one of the other reasons. And you see that even now, and eventually we'll get to this point if we have time, is even right now you see that individuals or organizations or institutions are trying to use and pull from this exact same playbook as well. How many people end up being anti, let's say, marja'iyya, or anti-institution, or anti-hawza, or they just don't like these things. So what they do is slowly just put in a little bit of shak, a little bit of doubt here and there. Why don't we question this? Why are they doing that? This doesn't make sense. This. You start to doubt more and more and more, and then eventually you're cut off. And you have a lot of people who say, I don't believe these anymore. I do taqleed to the Imam of the time. Like, what do you mean you do taqleed to the Imam of the time? Which risala? Look, if you have a risala, give me a copy. Like, I'd love to see that. If you're getting like WhatsApp messages from him and you can ask him fiqh questions, let me know. What do you mean that the Imam of the time is your marja? No, that's not the case. If it was the case, we'd all be doing taqleed like that. No, come on, don't make a game out of Shiism like this. No, the maraja, they're trying their best. There's deficiencies, of course. But don't just undermine the systems like this. So I'm not saying that there's not deficiencies. There are issues. And we have to kind of sit there, collectively discuss what the problems are and work on them. But we don't just toss out everything altogether because there might be one or two minor issues there, right? Or a few bad apples or a few kind of corrupt things. The same sort of idea. I don't know if this is going to be controversial, right? When some people say, because there's some bad police, we need to just completely destroy and get rid of police altogether. No, okay, that's not the idea. Obviously, we need to have a lot of reform. There needs to be some change there, but no, don't be extreme and say toss it out altogether. Or when you go, especially I haven't really heard the conversations over here, but in Europe especially, you have this sort of anarchist movement because they've seen the corruption that happens in governments, so they say, you know what, no governments at all. Like, okay, if you've got no governments at all, you're talking about chaos then. And you have to have something there. You have a system in place, and then you start working on, how to actually fix it. And there might be some places you need to fix, and there actually might be just some misunderstandings on our part too, right? I don't want to get into it. We know the moon sighting thing every single time this comes up. Every single time, I'm sure you all hear it too, or maybe some of you have these issues. They're like, how come the Maraja don't fix this? And the Maraja are like, look, this is not our job to fix. Like, we've given you the fatwa, we've given you practical solutions on if you really want to have Eid on the same day, do so-and-so, like travel and, do this, break your whatever it is. These are practical solutions, just do that. We're not going to change our ijtihad and our fatwa to, make it convenient for you. So there are sometimes misunderstandings on our part. So, sometimes we have to humble ourselves a little bit as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, this idea of ghurba and being gharib, when we think about it now, one of the major issues is, look, the Imam, as he's been, he's pulled from Medina, he's taken to Khurasan. Ma'mun specifically tells the people, when you're taking, my cousin through these routes, make sure you go around and keep away from all those Shia, pro-Shia cities. The people who love the Imam, don't go to those cities because they're going to rile everybody up and they'll end up, revolting. So they took him around this long, long route just to make sure that it was all like anti-Shia, basically, sentiments that they were going through, right? Again, it was strategic on that part. But even those places where the Imam stopped, you see that because of his personality, because of his words, his hidayat, everything, people just got attracted to him naturally. And even in Khurasan, when he was finally stationed there, the one major issue, so this is something that I think we need to open up as well. The ghurba that the Imam ended up facing, yes, a large part of it was because of the issues we mentioned. But some part of it too, according to some of our ulama, is because of the Shias there themselves. The Shias were the cause of the Imam's ghurba. First we'll talk about back then, and then we'll talk about today as well. So, okay, what about back then? Well, back then, in Khurasan, he did have a decent amount of support. Think about it. One of the reasons Ma'mun brought him and fake made him the crown prince and, you'll be the next emir and everything, is because Ma'mun wanted to trick the Shias, the simple-minded Shias, and say, see, I'm one of you. Because on paper, on face value, Ma'mun, the Abbasids were Shias, and that, whatever that happens to mean, whatever that meant for them. And it's funny, you look in some riwayat, when you see Ma'mun speaking with some of his other, wazirs or counselors, or even some of the Imam or the other Shias, he said, look, I'm actually a Shia, you know that? By belief, I'm a Shia. I practice Shia fiqh too. The only thing is, I love power and I love money, so I'm not going to give this khilafah up. It's funny how honest they were about these things. Right? There are some, historians that mention these ideas. So they knew that the Khilafah belonged to. He said, cousin, I know this belongs to you, but what can I do? I want this. I want this power. He also knew, though, that a lot of the Shias they knew that the Imam needed to be the actual Khalifa. It was up to him. He was the Imam. So they said, you know what? I'll bring him here. And then all those simple-minded Shias who don't understand the depth of real fiqh of Shias, because the real Shias knew that no Imam would ever want to work for a taghut, oppressive government. They knew that. This is clear in the riwayat, right? And any real Shia knew that back then too. So most of them, or some of them at least, recognize that, okay, Ma'mun is bringing him here, there's some ulterior motive. So we're not going to play these games. But unfortunately, there were many, many Shias who just didn't get it. Right? This juhal, these jahil Shias that were there. They said, oh my God, Ma'mun is amazing. And these were the same ones that when Muhammad Amin and Ma'mun had their little, back and forth skirmish, what were they doing? Who were they supporting? Ma'mun. Even though their Imam said, listen, stay out of it. There is no benefit for the Shias in this. Let them hash it out, right? When two people like this, sometimes we talk about lesser of two evils. At least what the Imam said in that situation was, no, both these evils, you can't support either of them. Keep away. Some Shias, unfortunately, just said, that's fine. We don't care. We're going to support Ma'mun. He said he's going to give us support and he's going to help the Shias out. Did that happen after? No, it didn't. Well, maybe on face value. What we'd say is false representation. Keep that phrase in mind because we're going to get back to that inshallah, right? And that's what Ma'mun offered, false representation. He said, see, look, I've got your Imam right here. He's going to be the Khalifa soon, don't worry. But if you pay attention, again, how did Imam actually accept? First he said, I don't want this position. He was forced to, we know that, right? He was forced by the sword. He said, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you. He said, fine, I'll take the position since you're threatening me, but I have to set a condition. So Ma'mun says, okay, what's your condition? He said, I'm not going to speak in public. I'm not going to get involved in any governmental affairs. I'm not going to give any governmental advice. I'm not going to get involved in politics whatsoever. So the Imam knew that Ma'mun was playing politics, so he one-upped him. Because now the Imam could focus on, again, these grassroots sort of movements rather than getting involved in dirty politics of Ma'mun. And Ma'mun tried constantly to do that. In one incident, for example, Ma'mun was having trouble with one of his governors who was, again, he was a Shia, obviously, but he wasn't obeying Ma'mun, and he was having some issues. So Ma'mun said, he told, oh, my dear cousin, my Habibi, these fancy, lovely words that these guys used. Please, why don't you send, a letter to, this governor that I have, that, maybe he should just, for the sake of the ummah and all these things, he should listen to what I'm saying. And the Imam, he's like, Ma'mun, or, he would address him as Amir al-Mu'mineen. He said, didn't we set a condition early on? Didn't I agree? Didn't you agree that I would only become this crown prince if I did not get involved in any political things? I was like, yeah, you got me. So, see, Ma'mun tried to play those games too, but Imam was one step ahead. Him not getting involved like this made sure that if Shias really paid attention, they would have seen that, hey, maybe the Imam doesn't actually want to do this. Maybe he's actually being threatened. And some Shias started to pick up the pace and were like, okay, maybe there's something else going on behind the scenes that we don't understand. But unfortunately, many Shias just didn't get it. And the fact that they still were okay with Ma'mun being the Khalifa, they still supported him, even with their Imam under duress and under threat, shows how gharib the Imam really was. Can you imagine if the Imam at the time was here right now, and he was being forced to work for one of these, like, let's say the Al Saud, right? And the Shias were like, yeah, it's okay, it's okay, let him work for the Al Saud, what's the big deal, it's good for Muslim unity, whatever. How demeaning would that be? And that's why some ulama say, that's why right now, it makes no sense for the Imam to come back. Like how many Muslims and Shias would actually support the Imam at the time in these sort of circumstances? I don't even want to don't even get me started on the recent change in visa stuff that these Saudis have pulled. Like, what is this? Ugh. Remember I said that slowly institutions and people want you to pull away from ulama? Look at this move that they pulled right now. Because on paper now, an alim who's already gone before technically can't apply, right? Given the conditions that are there right now, for those who are following this. If you've already gone, then you're not allowed to apply for a visa now. So that means any alim who normally takes groups, right now they can't apply anymore. So that means all you're going to have are people who have never gone before, all showing up for Hajj, and the only guides that will be allowed are the ones at the Al Saud appoint. Who do you think they're going to appoint for the Shias? I'll let you guys figure it out. I think you're smart enough. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, let's go back to what we were talking about. So, our Imam is gharib. He's got all these Shias around him. On paper, they should be his supporters. But they're okay with Ma'mun. They're okay with the situation. They don't really understand the pain and the struggle that our Imam is going through. So, because they are, in a sense, supporting Ma'mun, in a sense, they are the ones who are harming and destroying Shi'ism and Imamat. This is one of the reasons, the deeper reasons why the Imam is gharib. Even right now, if we take it to this time, I'm sure many of you have been for ziyarah, many places, maybe even Mashhad as well. For those of you who have been for ziyarah in any of the places where the Aimma are buried, may Allah grant you the opportunity to go again. And for those of you who haven't had the chance, may Allah grant you the opportunity to go, inshallah, for ziyarah. When you go, one of the main issues that we deal with is when we get there, we all want to go, we want to express our love for the Ahlul Bayt. We want to go and grab on the zari, right? And express all of our love for the Imam, right? Ask our hajat and things like that, perform tawassul, right? That's what our heart wants to do. And sometimes what that ends up entailing for some people is that if there's a crowd there, if there's a lot of people, you're like, Imam, I see you, and there's some other people here, I'm going to push and shove my way to get to you. I don't care. Now, honestly, do you really think that this is how the Imam wants a Shia to treat other mu'mineen? So even right now, unfortunately, even if you look to these places of ziyarah, maybe we are these types right now, and we have to really think about this. When we go for ziyarah, is our own egotistical desires, which we call love for the Imam, is that trumping the akhlaq that we should have, that the Imams have passed down? When we're going for the ziyarah, we're saying, Imam, I'm coming to you. Like, okay, are you going to subvert and completely toss away the lessons and guidance that he's provided, just so you can go and grab on the zari and talk to him? So even right now, the Imam, there in Mashhad, when you see maybe some people who are going around and acting in a undignified way, even right now we might say the Imam is gharib, still existing like this. People who are still not understanding the lessons that the Aimma, especially Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam, has passed down to us. So even in that sense, even for us right now, we can even say that a 12th Imam is gharib too, until we're able to understand exactly what he's supposed to come for. What we need to do to make sure that when he does come, inshallah, may Allah hasten his appearance, that we will be at the forefront of his supporters. We need to understand that, what that means. And again, I'm not going to talk about these things being right around the corner. I don't want to get into all that, fancy discussions, whatever. It could be tomorrow, it could be 3,000 years down the line. Nobody knows, right? Things always seem like they're really bad, but everybody throughout history has always said that. Even the ulama around the time, right after the ghaibah of the 12th Imam said, oh, he's going to come back in a few years, we'll see. Everybody thinks the Imam's going to come back all the time. We can always interpret these signs any way we want to. Those signs really shouldn't matter for us. What matters is listen to the teachings. If you're following them, according to some riwayat, even if you die before the Imam comes back, they say you'll be resurrected and you'll join the Imam anyway. So what does it matter whether he comes back during your lifetime or not? As long as we understand his teachings, we act upon those teachings, then we'll never be gharib from the Imam and he'll never be gharib from us. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So now the last thing I want to talk about is kind of connecting it more to what's happening right now. So we talked about the Imam's ghurba, right? Physically, metaphysically, in terms of the ideology, in terms of support and all this. And I said I want to rant about Ms. Marvel, so now I'm going to do that. Remember the phrase I told you to remember? It was false representation. Everybody's excited about Ms. Marvel, and I got to tell you, I don't know why. Well, okay, I know why, but I think we really need to think about why that's the case that people are so excited. Now, some of you may not know. So Ms. Marvel is the character in Marvel, obviously, right? Although they do, well, I don't want to get into the Marvel DC stuff. Let's leave that aside for another majlis. But, so Ms. Marvel is a character in Marvel Comics. The character is a Pakistani American growing up in Jersey. Right? There's Jersey all over the place, right? Actually, growing up in Jersey City. She's 16 years old. She finds out she has powers and blah, 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 whatever. There's a whole story about her. So the comic has been around for a while, and now it's actually on Disney Plus, right? So it's a live action show now. And they've actually hired a Muslim actor for it, a Muslim actress, right? She's, I believe, an Ismaili Shia girl from Canada, Pakistani Canadian. So she's playing it, and now everybody's excited. Say, see, representation. We've got a Muslim there. We've got a Muslim girl there. And some, if they really pay attention to it and they go on, IMDb or whatever, they say, oh, it's actually a Shia, even though it's Ismaili, whatever. Oh, it's a Shia Muslim girl who's representing it. Isn't that awesome? Finally, we have one of our own there representing. Now, we have to understand a little bit about the character. The character tropes are all the same, meaning this is a Pakistani girl who doesn't observe hijab, right? She grows up in a traditional Desi household, meaning the parents are the strict conservative types, and then she, the character Kamala, is like, oh, I don't understand why my parents are being so strict with me. I just want to be free. I want to be an individual. I want to do whatever I want. This white boy, that's my friend. I'm in love with him. The typical stuff that Disney and all these other shows do. The exact same stuff. White boy, sorry. You know what I mean, right? Come to save the day. And they fall in love, and I have to break away from my Pakistani family dynamic and the strict Eastern stuff. The exact same stuff. Now, some people say, look, Hasan, isn't this good? Because they'll say to me, Hasan, look, you grew up in a Desi Shia household too. Didn't you get a kind of strict, restrictive, religious, whatever cultural thing, upbringing? I'm like, yeah, I did. And didn't it cause you some damage? I'm like, yeah, I'm messed up. Definitely, I'm traumatized. I won't deny that. May Allah bless my parents. They tried what they could, but a lot of us are messed up. I won't deny that. Or what we call in the psychological world, generational trauma. That's the fancy term, right? We're all suffering from generational trauma, which is a real thing, by the way, which we all need to sit down and get some therapy because we're all messed up, 100%. So that's there. I don't deny that. And is it authentic, quote unquote, I hate that word, but is it authentic to the Pakistani Muslim experience, especially in New Jersey? I'm like, yeah, I was in New Jersey too, so yeah, it does ring a bell to some degree. I wasn't that practicing as well when I was a kid, so I get it too. But the question is this, is seeing this specific interpretation or representation actually a good thing from an Islamic perspective? Is seeing people who are struggling with their faith and then end up really not practicing, for example, not actually, I mean, again, I don't want to pick on the hijab, but because that's the actual character and that's the sort of main feature there too, right? And because she kind of breaks away from the traditional mindset and all these things, right? Is that actually really representative of Islam? Now look, there's two things that I'd like for us to think about. One thing is being representative of Muslims, and there's another thing that is being representative of Islam. You can represent Muslims in a lot of ways. Like for example, let's say some Hollywood movie comes out or TV show comes out, and there's some there's like a serial killer, and they're trying to find out who did this and whatever. And let's say at the end they find out, and it's some hijabi girl, right? Some hijabi from I don't know, like Tunisia, or whatever, and she's the serial killer. Are Muslim women going to come out and say, finally, representation for all the Muslim women serial killers? Like, yes, we did it. We got there. Like, is that the representation that you want to see? Like, what are we talking about? Or let's say, imagine if they had a Muslim version of Breaking Bad, right? There was some, right? It was a Muslim guy who ended up running a meth lab. Would we say, finally, Muslim men who are like, crack addicts or meth heads, finally, we got representation out there? Like, what are you talking about? Why do you want this kind of stuff to be represented? Not everything is meant to be out there in the public. Now look, for those who are, let's say, more liberal leaning, and they see this, I can understand why they like this. Because they want, and they like the more liberal interpretation of Islam. So okay, it makes sense for you. I understand that. But, and if you actually look at the creators of the character Ms. Marvel, right? So two of them are, there's a bunch of co-creators. Two of them are Muslim women. One of them is a white, I think she's a white American convert. I think G. Wilson is her name. And the other one, I believe, yeah, so Pakistani American from New Jersey. So basically the character is largely based on herself and her own experience. Sana Amanat, I think her name is, right? So she says, and if you look at the interviews, it's like, this character is based on my journey and my struggles and what I went through. It's like, okay, do you represent all of the other Muslim girls who are around? Now, a lot of Muslim girls might say, yeah, that's what we represented. Maybe even Muslim boys might say, yeah, that's what we have. But we might respond to them because they actually had their own criticisms that came to them. And for example, traditional Muslims said, why didn't you give her hijab? It's not fair. So their response, which in a sense was a good one, they said, look, do the majority of Muslim girls in the West, do they observe hijab? And if you look at statistics, if you go by Pew Research, you don't have to, but if you do, the answer is no. The majority of Muslims right now in America are not practicing. The majority, unfortunately. And there's reasons for why that's the case, which we're not going to talk about. But yeah, so obviously, whether it's praying or fasting or hijab, whatever it is, the majority are not practicing. So they say, look, we're representing the majority of Muslim girls. Like, okay, fine, no problem. But just take a step back with me for a second. I said, we were talking about representation, underrepresentation, and all these ideas, right? That was the idea, is representing minorities. Like, yeah, that's what we're doing. Like, okay, no problem. And you want to bring Muslims into the forefront of Marvel and media and all this because we're underrepresented. We're not out there. Yes, okay, agree with you. We're minorities, no problem. And Muslims are also underrepresented as heroes and things like that too. Right? Yeah. We agree. Yeah, that's true. They're a minority. They're not represented properly. Okay, fine. No problem. We agree with you there too. I said, okay. So we got the Muslim part and the woman part. Now, you tell me, who's in the majority? Practicing or non-practicing Muslims? By their own admission, non-practicing are the majority. So if you really wanted to represent minorities, the ones who are underrepresented, it would be practicing Muslims. I mean, fully Orthodox traditional Muslims. If you really wanted to stick to your guns and say everything's about representing those who don't have a voice, tell me, where is the actual traditional voice? Is there anyone in the media that actually properly represents the traditional form of Islam out in the media? No. And we all know why that's the case, because they don't want it out there. They don't want an intelligent person coming and explaining the ideas of hijab, or being, let's say, anti-abortion, or being pro-traditional marriage and relationships. They don't want these things out there. They want, again, it's obviously June right now, so they want their own version of pride. But when we try to offer pride for traditional Orthodox Islam, they say, no. We can't have that in public, though. So how come you get to have your own secular version, we can't have our own version, though? That seems a little hypocritical, doesn't it? You get your version, we don't get ours? I don't know. I think it's a bit unfair. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, look, I get it why people may be happy of seeing a Muslim girl, a Muslim Pakistani girl, out there in this show. Now, again, I watched it. Obviously, you guys know me. I'm a Marvel fan. I watch everything. I watched it, trying to be objective. And I think some of the cinematography was actually pretty good. The graphics, the direction, I actually liked it. Dialogue, I think, was really terrible, especially if you watch it. If you look at the father figure, I have never seen any Desi father in my life ever act like that. Never. And you guys who have watched it, if you watch it, tell me if any Desi father actually acts like that in private or in public. No Desi father acts like that. But you can watch yourself and you tell me if you feel otherwise. I'm, again, always up to debate and disagreement about this issue. Look, I'm all for that sort of representation too. But we have to think ourselves as Muslims, how do we want to be represented? Do we want the Islam that Allah has sent down to the prophets and Imams, do we want that to be represented? Or our own version of Islam that by admission, we know that there's some deficiencies there. Look, this is not about judging people. I make mistakes constantly all the time too. You guys know I have serious issues, right? I make mistakes, we all make mistakes. We're all working on this stuff together. We all have sins that we're trying to work on. We're not perfect. Do we want that stuff out in the public though? Do we want characters to come out who are making mistakes and becoming role models for other Muslims? For young people to say, yes, you can be a hero and still be non-practicing. No, we don't want this. This is not the ideal message. We say, look, what if you had a message of somebody who struggles with their faith, and like many of us, like I struggled when I was when I was younger, and then finally in college, I said, okay, actually this traditional perspective does make sense. Like where is that journey represented? For people who are, let's say, born again, if you want to use that term. We don't see that anywhere. I said, if you want to be authentic, then that needs to be given a voice, definitely. Because that voice hasn't been given out at all, I think. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I want to be cognizant of time as well. I think namaz is, 8:54, right? Yeah, okay. So let me stop here for a second. Let me just re-summarize everything, right? We're talking about ghurba of the eighth Imam. There's physical ghurba, right? Ghurba just means to be distant and remote. There's physical, meaning geographical, like the Maghrib, the West, can be away from the truth and things like that. You can be geographically far and distant. The Imam was far away from his family, but he was also gharib in the sense that he was far away from people who were accepting of the truth. We right now might be making ourselves or making our Imam gharib by keeping ourselves away from his teachings as well, right? And it's a struggle, we all have to work on it. Ma'mun tried to play games with the Shias by this idea of false representation, and he tricked the Shias like this. We want to make sure that we are Muslims that have a higher level of consciousness and awareness. Look, we're all struggling, we all want to do better, 100%. Just because we don't practice doesn't mean we're going to go to hell. That's not the way it is. Allah is forgiving and merciful, 100%. But when we look out for representation in the media, we have to recognize we're not going to get the picture that's going to make us better Muslims. It's not going to come because they don't want us to be better Muslims. They want their version of what it means to be a good human being, which means be an individual, follow your heart, follow your desires, break away from tradition, break away from the East. become secular, be humanist, and all these things. They don't understand the value of Eastern Orthodox traditional conservative mindsets. And they don't just do this to Muslims, they do this to Christians, to Jews, to everybody else, right? And we're actually all in this together in that sense. So we need to really think about this and say, look, that false representation which took place with the Imam then is still taking place with us right now. We want to make sure we don't fall for these, kind of simple tricks. If we want representation, let's go out and get it. Or let's build it ourselves, and let's find it locally if we have to as well. And let's have these open discussions too. And hey, if you want to give me a couple $1 million, I'll put together a movie for you if you want. I'll do something nicer, which we have some proper role models and characters. I'll get a, Pakistani, well, I won't do a boy. I can't do my own story. But I'll find a Pakistani Muslim girl from Dallas if you want, that grew up and it was a tough upbringing. And then later on, she found the path and, she grew from it. Well, that's a good story too, I think, right? And I'll get some good directors behind it too. Well, some of them, I don't know if we would agree on, I'd actually want Tarantino to direct something like that, but some of you might disagree, because then that'll get really dark. I think that might be a little too much, but you know what I mean. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So yeah, I wanted to stop here. So right before, I think there's nothing in between now and namaz, right? I don't think so. Where is it now? No, nothing, right? If anybody has any questions or comments, or any objections or feedback, bismillah. If anybody says, Hasan, everything you said is trash, I want to object. Go ahead. I love that stuff too. No problem. If you think that, hey, your critique of Ms. Marvel is unfounded, you're welcome to object to that too, no problem. If you think that it's good, then hey, say something. Or if you have a general question about anything else, the topic tonight, you can talk about that. Otherwise, I can rant about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, because that was another terrible piece of Marvel movie as well. No, nothing? Okay. So I guess then we will end. Jazakallah khair again for your attention. Apologies if anything that I said was triggering as usual. I hope that at least it'll spark some conversation, that you'll think about it. Even if you disagree, that's okay. Talk about it amongst yourselves. If you have any points that you think might be good for me to hear, for me to think about it from the other perspective, then share with me, so that I can grow as well. If any points that we discussed tonight are beneficial, all khair comes from Allah. If there's anything which was incorrect or confusing or misguiding, then all of that comes from me, and I ask for forgiveness and the ability to correct that over there. I once again want to thank all of you for your attention, for your focus, and for your participation, for coming, and for increasing the barakah in a gathering like this. I hope to see all of you again very soon. I ask you to pray for our teachers, our ulama, who are trying to spread this haqq and connect us back to the imams. Pray for all the ulama, especially the marajib. We ask that you pray for all of specifically our teachers as well, those ulama who are local, here like Sheikh Amin, like Sheikh Mehdi, like Sayyid Hussein, who are all here, who are guiding your community in probably the best way possible. So we pray for their health and safety and their families and their teachers. And obviously make sure you include me in your du'as too, right? My family, my teachers, and myself as well. So help me correct my own defects. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad, wa ala Ahl Baytih Tayyibin Tahirin.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أشهد أن محمد رسول الله اللهم صل على أشهد أن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله تسبيح بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد النبي وعلى ذريته وعلى أهل بيته اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك ورب صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Aliyan waliyullah. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله ربي منكم يا محسن وقد أتاك نفسي أنت محسن الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أكبر. استغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على